Benson. News! Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this per tweet from Michael Benson. Jake Paul has insisted that Amanda Serrano had to return to featherweight for her next fight or she'd have been stripped, and said that she still intended to do the Katie Taylor rematch. He called Eddie Hearn a snake and a liar for his comments on the situation.
Well, you're essentially saying that hanging on to 2 titles at featherweight was more important to Amanda than winning undisputed at lightweight.
Amanda Serrano's last 2 fights were fought well above the featherweight limit. They were both lightweight contests. The fight with Miriam Gutierrez and the subsequent mega match with Katie Taylor. She hasn't fought as a featherweight in her last 2 fights. Better still, priorities. It seems more a priority to Amanda to hang on to those 2 featherweight titles than participate in yet another mega match with Katie Taylor. Because if this story checks out, if this is how they justify foregoing a Taylor rematch for this fight with Brenda Carabajal, it's because you value those 2 titles you've got at 126 pounds more than winning those 4 titles, those 4 alphabet titles, at 135 pounds.
You already tried to lift them off of Katie Taylor in her last fight, and you came up short.
You stay up there any while longer trying to take what Katie Taylor's got, trying to take those belts from her, you're going to end up losing what you've got down there at 126 pounds. I understand it.
Oh, I get it. It just still means what it means.
You're prioritizing the featherweight titles you do have for the lightweight titles you don't.
The lightweight titles you don't have and the lightweight titles you don't think you can win.
Not straight away, not in a rematch, not in Ireland at Croker Park where they wanted to do the second fight. Amanda Serrano and Jake Paul, most valuable promotions. They must not like Amanda Serrano's chances in an immediate rematch with Katie Taylor, because if they did, well, you go ahead with the Taylor fight on the assumption that you can do better in the rematch and become the lightweight division's undisputed champion. That's if you like your chances. But if you don't like your chances,
you forego the rematch, you live to fight another day.
Go back down to featherweight, defend your 2 alphabet titles, and revisit the Taylor rematch at a later date. I mean, it's strategy. It looks like strategy to me. Katie Taylor is somewhat older than Amanda Serrano, and maybe what the Amanda Serrano people are thinking to themselves, let's age her out a bit. Why do an immediate rematch at Croker Park of all places? If we couldn't beat her in New York, in our own neck of the woods, we ain't gonna beat her in Ireland.
That's the way I see it. Feel free to disagree.
Though what would you be disagreeing with? Is it my imagination, just my imagination, that a rematch with Katie Taylor is a lot bigger than a Brenda Carabajal fight? Is that just me?
So if one fight is bigger than the other fight, why would you go with the other fight?
Well, I just told you why you'd go with the other fight. There are some virtues associated with delaying a second fight with Katie Taylor, delaying a rematch. It affords Amanda the chance to get herself back in the winner's bracket in a very winnable fight, a winnable situation where she's the A-side fighter and the betting favorite. You get to let a little bit of time pass to where Katie Taylor, maybe she gets a little bit older, fights in another war.
Takes a couple of hard shots, becomes a little bit more vulnerable. Ages over time, a little slower.
A little bit more beatable, while you take care of business downstairs at featherweight. I don't doubt that what Jake Paul is saying is true, or that there isn't some truth to it. Brenda Carabajal just so happens to be the IBF's interim champion at featherweight. In that way, she is Amanda Serrano's mandatory challenger. Thus, fighting her, it is necessary to hang on to the blue belt.
Why would you be worried about hanging on to your featherweight titles if you like your chances at lightweight?
Why would you be worried about hanging on to your featherweight titles if you like your own chances to take Katie Taylor's up there at 135 pounds? Or is it that you don't like your chances in that fight? You don't like your chances in an immediate rematch in Ireland, least of all. Is that what it is?
Like I said, it's a bit of strategy. I understand it.
I'm just not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'm not going to pussyfoot around as to what I think is going on in this situation. Why would you choose a significantly smaller fight over a bigger fight? What kind of logic goes into that? And that's what I think the logic is.
Meanwhile, they're talking about putting Katie Taylor in a novelty fight, a crossover fight with either Holly Holm or Chris Cyborg.
I'm not really a fan of those crossover fights, those novelty fights, but I can hardly fault Katie Taylor for moving ahead with that kind of plan when initially it was their plan to do the second fight with Amanda Serrano, and it's the Serrano people that chose to forego that plan, prioritizing featherweight titles as opposed to the opportunity to win Katie's from her.
That's all we got here, so I mean, what the hell are you supposed to do?
Just in keeping with the theme of all things Jake Paul, he was doing the rounds for his upcoming fight with Rahman Jr., and he said, "Boxing was a dying sport before I came and saved the entire sport, basically, single-handedly. Fucking Tyson Fury's afraid to fight Anthony Joshua. Fury's afraid to fight Alexander Usyk. This is why boxing is dying, because these fights aren't mandatory, and whatever success Jake Paul has found in the sport of boxing, that hardly makes him boxing's messiah, boxing's savior."
How did him fighting a YouTuber, a basketball player, and 2 MMA guys save boxing?
You have to make it make sense. The stuff these young guys say these days, this generation of kids, they'll just say whatever.
Whatever stupid shit comes across their mind.
You'd have to be pretty fucking stupid to think that fighting Nate Robinson, Ben Askren, and Tyrone Woodley 2 times somehow saved boxing, as if boxing needed saving. Boxers...
If I had a nickel for every time I heard somebody say that boxing was a dying sport.
When boxing as a sport is more global now than it was in its heyday, in its golden era here in the United States. These days, you've got boxers hailing from all 4 corners of the globe, anywhere from Uzbekistan to the United Kingdom, obviously Mexico and their rich history in the sport, but Argentina as well.
Many European countries.
As well as North America, the United States, Canada. There's a boxing scene in all 4 corners of the globe. So where does Jake Paul get that fighting MMA guys in a boxing ring equates to him saving the sport, equates to him saving boxing? In what way is that saving boxing?
Sometimes I don't know if this guy's a genius or a jackass.
I really don't. Is he a marketing genius behind the guise of an internet troll turned pugilist, or is he really that delusional? Does he really believe what he's saying? He thinks he saved boxing. He said, "It took me a while to catch on to how Eddie Hearn is, but he's very two-faced. He's very jealous of me. I'm this new, young promoter that's doing it way bigger and better than him. I have 20 times his platform, and he's been doing this his entire life."
Oh, really? So are you doing any $80 million fights this year?
Because if you are doing it bigger and better than Eddie as far as promoting, then surely you can point me in the direction of the $80 million fight that you're promoting this year.
You know, because Joshua versus Usyk, too, that's a little over $80 million that went into that fight.
Saudis paid Matchroom a little over $80 million for the rights to it. What kind of fights like that is Jake Paul's most valuable promotions promoting? Because Jake Paul versus Rahman Jr., that's not an $80 million fight.
Is Jake Paul versus Rahman Jr. on the same scale, the same size as Canelo versus Golovkin 3?
This guy, I'll tell you, he thinks he saved boxing. He thinks he's doing things on a bigger scale than Matchroom, than Eddie Hearn. He thinks Eddie Hearn's jealous. A lot of people out there, they think Jake Paul's the reason that the Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano fight got over the line. But the financing for the fight, it didn't come from Jake Paul. It didn't come from his broadcast partner being Showtime. All of that was situated by Matchroom and DAZN.
That's who did the fight. That's who paid for it. That's where it took place.
Whatever Amanda Serrano made fighting on Jake Paul's undercards pales in comparison to what she just made fighting Katie Taylor on DAZN. And DAZN are the ones who paid for that fight, not Jake Paul and not Most Valuable Promotions.
Like I said, I don't know if this kid's a marketing genius or a jackass.
Is he serious? Is he serious when he says that he thinks Eddie Hearn is jealous and that he's doing things on a bigger scale, much bigger scale than Eddie Hearn, when the only fighters you're really promoting are yourself and Amanda?
That's not the same thing as orchestrating fight dates for an entire stable of fighters. Do you have any idea how big Matchroom's stable is?
Sometimes I just don't know. I don't know if Jake Paul's a marketing genius or a jackass.
There was some big hubbub yesterday about the Rahman fight being in jeopardy.
As Jake Paul revealed, Rahman Jr. was attempting to negotiate for more money. Who knows if this fight even happens at this point? All these guys want to fight me until it's actually time to fight me.
Well, I mean, maybe Tommy Fury might have fumbled the bag, though that don't apply to everybody. I don't think it applies to Rahman Jr.
Rahman Jr., who said yesterday, that doesn't even sound right. Jake Paul just has you guys believe in anything. I'm ready to go August 6th. Money has never been an issue over here. Jake Paul needs to tell y'all what the real problem is.
You know, I don't know if he ever did. I don't know if he ever addressed what exactly the real problem is or what the real problem was.
And if said real problem has been sorted, has been situated, they went ahead with the press conference. They had these 2 guys up there.
Jake is a real fighter. He's a real fighter, and we respect that. But I just think that he's moving too quick. I think he picked the wrong guy at the wrong time. So
Too quick for your slow ass son who's not going to be able to hit me. Yeah, you're right. I am moving too quick, fast as shit.
Ric Flair with the WWE stuff again, but I mean, when we get in the ring, then we get in the ring. So,
You're not in the ring, sir. Your son's in the ring. He can't fight for you. You can't fight for him.
But I am talking, and excuse me for talking. Why you interrupting? Why you being rude at the
You're
press
saying
conference?
we in the ring. We're not
I'm
getting
in there
in.
with
You're not in the ring. It's me versus your son, and that's what he doesn't understand either. He thinks he's you. He thinks he's you, and that's his biggest mistake. He's not you. And August 6th, people are going to see that. I'm ending that whole-ass legacy that your whole-ass family got. When he gets under the lights, Madison Square Garden,
you ain't fought nobody.
in front of 20,000
You ain't fought
people.
nobody. Everybody you fought have been their debut.
Who have you fought?
Everybody you fought been their debut.
Who have you fought?
I just
Tyrone
fought somebody,
Woodley, UFC champion.
20 and
Ben
0.
Askren.
What are you talking
champion.
about?
Nate Robinson.
Champions in MMA.
NBA.
Champions in
All-star
MMA. NBA champion. No boxers.
That's
Don't
why
turn
I'm
your back
fighting
and
you.
run like you did when we sparred. Don't do that. I backed you in the corner.
Why were you so mad
Why
after
you turn
that?
around and run?
Why were you
turn
so
around
mad
and run?
after?
Who runs in a boxing ring? You
Why
ran
were
like
you
we was
so
in a
mad
track.
after?
He's a runner. He's a track star. What's
Why
going
were
on?
you so
Why are you
mad?
running in a boxing? Do you know how to box? Have you learned that yet? You learned that you can't run yet?
You're going to see.
Have you learned that? Have you learned that
gonna
much
see.
yet? That you can't be running in the ring? You learned that yet?
He's going to get beat up by a singer, a musician, a seashell collector, an amateur.
Disney boy.
I'm a
you
Disney
is not
boy.
about to beat
I'm a
me up.
YouTuber.
Who have you ever beat up?
I'm all of these
Who
things.
have you ever beat up? You ain't beat up nobody. You ain't beat up nobody.
You sound
What?
stupid.
No, you sound stupid. Who have you beat up?
Another name on
I
the
know.
list.
I know.
A pawn.
Yeah, okay. You say that now. You say that now. I'm about to give you your first loss. Stupid. Bet
When
money.
I beat you, you have to change
Jake,
your
Jake,
change your
Jake,
Instagram name to I let my
Jake.
dad down.
I'm not entertaining you and your content, bro. I'm here to whoop your ass. I'm gonna fuck you up on August 6th. And that's the bottom line. Yeah.
The introduction of Hasim Rahman Jr. to the spotlight, I think, at least for me, has gone a long way to selling this fight because I really wasn't interested in it until I saw the back and forth action between Jake and Hasim Rahman Jr. Hasim, who looks to have rattled Jake Paul's cage. He looked a bit rattled to me, if I'm being honest.
You know what? He better be careful before he finds himself in a fucking boxing match with a fucking boxer.
Hasim Rahman Jr., he doesn't give off that same Fredo Corleone energy we were getting from Tommy Fury. Now, this guy sounds like he means business.
Well, looks like Jake Paul stepped in some shit.
And finally, a story that's getting a lot of attention per tweet from Michael Benson. Floyd Mayweather said, Shakur Stevenson's a hell of a fighter. Devin Haney's a hell of a fighter. But guess what? If Top Rank has Haney and Shakur, then they need to fight each other. Don't worry about Gervonta Davis. Let Tank continue to do what Tank's doing via Fight Hype, and there you have it. That's right out of the horse's mouth. Not some content creator on YouTube, not some Twitter boxing account, some Instagram boxing account. Confirmation of what I've been telling you for what, 3-4 years now?
Not gonna fight any of these guys. He's not gonna fight any of these people.
They matched Gervonta Davis the way you would a prospect, as if he's still in the developmental stages of his career, whilst simultaneously heralding him as the biggest name anywhere at or around those weights. And it doesn't make sense because Gervonta Davis is a lot closer to 30 than he is to 20. I mean, he's not 30 yet.
No, he's 27 going on 28.
Where's Devin Haney, Shakur Stevenson? What are these guys, 22, 23 years old? Around there?
If he's supposed to be the cash cow of boxing, explain it to me.
Why is Canelo Alvarez, the real cash cow of boxing, expected to face everybody's fighters on the Matchroom side of things, the Top Rank side of things, and the PBC side of things, but Gervonta Davis...
No, everything's got to be in-house with him. He can't fight Devin. He can't fight Shakur.
Before that, he couldn't be asked to fight George Kambosos, and before that, he couldn't be asked to fight Teofimo Lopez, couldn't be asked to fight Vasil Lomachenko, Tevin Farmer, the other champions at 130 pounds, Miguel Berchelt, all those guys way back when. I mean, if this guy's supposed to be a cash cow, to some degree, why is he held to a different standard than Canelo Alvarez, who's fought anybody from Matchroom's guys to at least one of the PBC's guys, one of their unbeaten champions, but Gervonta Davis...
Well, he needs more protection.
I told you guys a little over a week ago. Those two guys in particular, Devin Haney, Shakur Stevenson, those are pure boxers, you understand. And pure boxers, stylistically, have a stylistic advantage over a boxer-puncher like Gervonta Davis. A boxer-puncher who's a decent counter-puncher to some degree, though for the most part what he does is capitalize off the other guy's mistakes.
Because he exclusively fights fighters that are prone to making mistakes.
There's always an angle. He doesn't want to fight anybody good, somebody who's all in their prime. Leo Santa Cruz throwing the same punch 3 times, he's begging to be countered. Rolly Romero threw the same combination in sequence back-to-back 2 times, ended up getting countered himself. Gervonta Davis, to some degree, is a decent counterpuncher who can capitalize off the other guy's mistakes.
And he can punch. He's got some power.
I do think his power is wildly overrated. I mean, he needed 12 rounds to dispatch a one-legged Yuriorkis Gamboa with a torn Achilles tendon. He couldn't stop Isaac Cruz.
What's his biggest claim to fame as a puncher at 135 pounds? Knocking out Rolly Romero.
Give me a break. I'm just giving it to you straight. It's the only way I know how to give it to you. And when it comes to those 2 guys, Devin Haney, Shakur Stevenson, those pure boxers have a stylistic advantage over a guy like Gervonta Davis because they don't make the mistakes that a Rolly Romero or a Leo Santa Cruz would make. They don't open up as much. They're very efficient. 1 or 2 punches at a time from the outside at a safe distance.
They're defensively responsible. That's their calling card.
Maybe one of these fights is a little bit closer than the other. Devin Haney versus Gervonta Davis. We know that Devin was hurt by Jorge Linares. Hard right hand that got through. He was noticeably hurt by the shot, noticeably hurt by the punch, all the same. Devin, Shakur, they have a stylistic advantage over Gervonta Davis. And it's not a coincidence that what Floyd is recommending is they take each other out as opposed to either one of them fighting his prize stallion.
Can't you see that after a while, it's not build-up. It's not build-up anymore.
They've consistently kept Gervonta Davis out of certain fights for the past 4 years. And even now that he's 27 going on 28 years old, even now that he's almost 30.
They still want to match him like a prospect. They still want to match him like he's a fighter that they're still developing.
It's not development. It's protection. It was always protection.
Teofimo Lopez was good enough to take on Vasyl Lomachenko at 23 years old. Why couldn't Gervonta Davis have done it before him?
Lomachenko versus Davis was a conversation long before Teofimo came into it.
Cash cow, he's a cash cow, he's a fucking cash cow.
A cash cow that can't be bothered to fight his contemporaries. A cash cow who's almost 30, still being matched like a prospect.
What, you're surprised?
You're surprised Floyd's saying this.